The wagon sat crooked in the middle of the trading post yard, one wheel sunk deep in mud that hadn't dried since the rains 3 days back. Dust hung in the air like a veil, catching the late afternoon sun in streaks of amber and gold. The horses were gone. The driver was gone. But the wagon remained, tilted and abandoned, with a single burlap sack resting in its bed. Garrett Cole had seen a lot of strange things in his 42 years riding the Arizona Territory, but an unattended wagon with valuables still inside, that was new. He stood at the edge of the post's porch, one boot propped on the railing, rolling a cigarette between calloused fingers. The trading post was quiet, too quiet for a Friday. Usually, trappers and drifters filled the place by now, swapping lies and whiskey. Today, the only sound was the creak of the weathered wood beneath his weight and the distant call of a crow. "Don't mess with it." Garrett turned. Old Ben, the post's owner, stood in the doorway, arms crossed over his barrel chest. His face was lined deep as canyon stone, eyes narrowed beneath the brim of a sweat-stained hat. "With what?" Garrett asked, though he already knew. "That wagon, that sack," Ben spat into the dirt. "Been sitting there since dawn, nobody's touched it." "Whose is it?" "Don't know, don't care." Ben's jaw tightened. "But I'm telling you, leave it be." Garrett's gaze drifted back to the wagon. The sack was large, maybe 4 feet long, wrapped tight with coarse rope. It bulged in the center, sagging under its own weight. Something about it felt wrong. Not dangerous exactly, just wrong. Like staring into a mine shaft and knowing, without seeing, that the darkness goes deeper than it should. "Someone just left it." "Driver came through at first light," Ben said slowly, as if the memory itself tasted sour. "Paid for grain, watered his horses, then rode off without the wagon, left it right there. When I asked him about it, he looked me dead in the eye and said, 'Don't look under the sack.'" Garrett's fingers paused mid-roll. "That's it." "That's it." Then he rode east, fast. The wind picked up, stirring the dust into lazy spirals. Garrett watched the sack shift slightly in the breeze, just a tremor, nothing more, but it was enough to send a chill up his spine. "You think it's a body?" Garrett asked. Ben didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was quieter. "I think it's something a man don't walk away from unless he's got a damn good reason." Garrett finished rolling his cigarette and lit it, the flame briefly illuminating the hard lines of his face. He had the look of someone who'd lived through more than he cared to remember, a scar above his left brow, a crooked nose that had been broken twice, and eyes the color of storm clouds. He'd been a lawman once, back in New Mexico. That was before the hanging, before he learned that justice and law weren't always the same thing. Now he was just a man moving from town to town, trading horses and keeping his head down. But curiosity, that old bastard, had never left him. "I'm going to look," Garrett said. "Bad idea." "Probably." Ben shook his head and disappeared back inside. The door swung shut with a groan. Garrett stepped off the porch, his boots sinking slightly into the damp earth. The air smelled of rain and rust. He crossed the yard slowly, eyes fixed on the sack. Up close, it looked even larger. The burlap was stained dark in places, and the rope binding it was knotted with a precision that spoke of careful hands. He circled the wagon once, listening, no sound from inside the sack, no movement. "Just wait." Garrett reached out and touched the fabric. It was rough beneath his fingers, cold despite the heat. He hesitated, Ben's words echoing in his mind. "Don't look under the sack." But Garrett had spent too many years ignoring warnings. Warnings were what got good men killed and bad men rich. He gripped the edge of the burlap and pulled it back. At first, he didn't understand what he was seeing. It wasn't a body, not entirely. It was a child, a boy, maybe 8 or 9 years old, curled on his side, bound at the wrists and ankles with the same precise knots that had sealed the sack. His skin was pale, almost gray, and his clothes were torn and filthy, but it wasn't the boy's condition that made Garrett's breath catch. It was the mark on his neck. A brand burned deep into the flesh just below his left ear. The shape was unmistakable, a coiled snake, mouth open, fangs bared. Garrett's knees buckled. He grabbed the side of the wagon to steady himself, his cigarette falling from his lips into the mud. He knew that brand. He'd seen it before. 7 years ago, on another child, in another town. The boy's eyes fluttered open. Blue, impossibly blue. He stared up at Garrett without fear, without hope, just a hollow, empty gaze that seemed to see straight through him. "Help me," the boy whispered. Garrett's mouth went dry. His hands trembled as he reached for the knots. Injures fumbling with the rope. The boy didn't move, didn't flinch, just watched. Behind him, the trading post door creaked open. "I told you not to look," Ben said quietly. Garrett didn't turn around. "Who did this?" "You already know." And he did. The snake brand belonged to a man named Silas Cord, a preacher, a prophet, a monster. Cord had led a congregation through the territory years back, preaching salvation and fire, but salvation came at a price. Children disappeared wherever he went. Some were found, most weren't. Garrett had tracked him once, nearly caught him, but Cord vanished into the desert and the trail went cold. Until now. "This boy's been in that wagon since dawn?" Garrett asked, his voice low and dangerous. "I reckon so. And you just left him there?" Ben stepped closer, his shadow falling over the wagon. "I left him because I know what happens to men who cross Silas Cord. I left him because I got a wife and a life I'd like to keep." He paused. "And because I knew someone like you would come along and open that sack anyway." Garrett finally freed the boy's wrists. The rope fell away, leaving deep red marks in the skin. The boy sat up slowly, rubbing his arms, still staring at Garrett with those unblinking blue eyes. "What's your name?" Garrett asked. The boy's lips moved, but no sound came out. He tried again, his voice barely a rasp. "Samuel." "Where's your family, Samuel?" The boy looked away, toward the horizon. "Gone." Garrett's jaw tightened. He turned to Ben. "Get me water and food." "Garrett." "No." Ben hesitated, then nodded and disappeared inside. Garrett knelt beside the wagon, eye level with the boy. "I'm going to help you, but I need you to tell me, where did Cord take you?" Samuel's gaze drifted back to Garrett. For a moment, something flickered behind those blue eyes. Fear, maybe, or memory. "North," Samuel whispered, "the valley with no name." Garrett felt the blood drain from his face. He knew the place. And he knew that if Silas Cord was still there, then this boy wasn't the only one. Ben returned with a canteen and a strip of dried meat wrapped in cloth. He handed them to Garrett without a word, then stepped back, eyes darting between the boy and the horizon as if expecting riders to appear at any moment. Samuel drank slowly, his small hands trembling around the canteen. Water spilled down his chin, but he didn't seem to notice. He chewed the meat mechanically, staring at nothing. Garrett watched him in silence. The boy's clothes were little more than rags, cotton shirt torn at the shoulder, trousers stained with dirt and something darker. His feet were bare, blistered and crusted with dried blood. He'd been walking or running. "How long were you with Cord?" Garrett asked gently. Samuel swallowed, his throat working. "Don't know, long time." "Weeks, month, longer." Garrett's fists clenched. "Were there others?" Samuel nodded. "How many?" The boy's eyes finally lifted to meet Garrett's. "Lots." Ben shifted his weight behind them, boots scraping against the dirt. "Garrett, you can't go after him." "I'm not asking your permission. You're one man, Cord's got followers, fanatics, they'd die for him. Then they'll get their chance." "Damn it, Cole," Ben's voice rose, then fell just as quickly. He glanced at the boy, then back at Garrett. "You know what happened last time. You know what he did to that deputy in Santa Fe. They found him hung upside down from a tree, tongue cut out, brand burned into his chest." Garrett stood slowly, his shadow falling over Samuel. "I know." "Then you know this ain't your fight." "It became my fight the moment I opened that sack." Ben's jaw worked, chewing on words he didn't say. Finally, he shook his head. You're gonna get yourself killed. Maybe. And the boy. Garrett looked down at Samuel. The boy had stopped eating, the meat still clutched in one small hand. He was watching Garrett with an expression that was hard to read, something between hope and resignation, like a man watching the sun set and knowing the night will be cold. I'll take him somewhere safe first, Garrett said. Safe, Ben laughed bitterly. There's no safe, not from Cord. You take that boy, you paint a target on both your backs. Then I'll deal with it. You're a damn fool. Probably. Ben spat into the dirt and turned away, muttering under his breath. He paused at the porch steps, hand on the railing. If you're set on this, at least wait till morning. Sun's already dropping. You ride out now, you'll be in the dark before you get 10 miles. Garrett glanced at the sky. Ben was right. The sun hung low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the trading post. The desert at night was a different kind of dangerous, rattlers, coyotes, and worse. And if Cord had men watching the roads, darkness would give them the advantage. We'll stay the night, Garrett said, but we leave at first light. Ben nodded once, then disappeared inside. Garrett turned back to Sam. Yule, the boy, had finished the meat and was now staring at the wagon, his expression distant. Garrett crouched beside him. You ever fired a gun, Samuel? The boy shook his head. You ever ridden a horse alone? Another shake. Garrett sighed. We're going to need to fix that. Samuel's gaze shifted to Garrett, and for the first time, something like emotion flickered across his face. Why are you helping me? It was a simple question, but it hit Garrett harder than he expected. He thought about the deputy in Santa Fe. He thought about the other children, faces he'd never seen, names he'd never know. He thought about the brand on Samuel's neck and the weight of every choice he'd made that had led him to this moment. Because someone should have helped you a long time ago, Garrett said quietly. Samuel studied him for a long moment, then nodded. It wasn't trust, not yet, but it was a start. Inside the trading post, the air was thick with the smell of tobacco and old wood. Ben had lit a lantern, and the flickering light cast dancing shadows on the walls. A few shelves lined the room, stocked with canned goods, ammunition, and dusty bottles of whiskey. A table sat in the center, scarred and uneven. Garrett sat Samuel down on a stool near the stove and stoked the fire. The boy watched in silence, his hands folded in his lap. Ben poured 2 glasses of whiskey and set one in front of Garrett. You really think you can stop him? I stopped him once before. You almost stopped him. There's a difference. Garrett took a sip. The whiskey burned, but it was a good burn. This time I'll finish it. And if you don't, then at least I tried. Ben shook his head. You always were stubborn. They sat in silence for a while, the only sound the crackle of the fire. Samuel had curled up on the stool, his head resting against the wall, eyes half closed. He looked impossibly small. What do you know about the valley? Garrett asked. Ben's expression darkened. Not much. It's north past the ridge. Used to be a mining camp, but it dried up years ago. Folks say it's cursed. Animals won't go near it. Birds don't fly over it. Cord's there. If the boy says so, then yeah, probably. Garrett stared into his glass. How many men you think he's got? Hard to say. Last I heard, maybe a dozen. Could be more, could be less. Cord's followers come and go, some stay, some run, but the ones who stay, Ben trailed off, his gaze distant. They're true believers. They'd burn the world if he asked. Then I'll have to be smarter than them. Or faster. Garrett drained his glass and set it down. I'll be both. That night Garrett kept watch from the porch while Samuel slept inside. The stars were bright and cold overhead, scattered across the sky like broken glass. The desert stretched out in every direction, silent and vast. Garrett's mind churned. He thought about Sealer's Cord, about the man he used to be, charismatic, convincing, with a voice that could move crowds and a smile that could hide anything. Cord preached about redemption, about washing away sin and starting anew. But his version of redemption required sacrifice. and children, Cord had said, were the purest sacrifices of all. Garrett had been a marshal back then, chasing Cord through 3 territories. He'd gotten close once, in a town called Red Mesa, but Cord had slipped away in the night, leaving behind only the bodies of 2 children and a note pinned to the church door. The righteous will be tested. Garrett had failed that test. But not this time. He heard the sound of hooves in the distance, soft, rhythmic, growing closer. His hand moved instinctively to the revolver at his hip. 3 riders appeared on the horizon, silhouetted against the moonlight. They stopped just beyond the trading post fence, watching. Garrett stood slowly, his hand steady on the gun. One of the riders leaned forward in his saddle. His voice carried across the still air, calm and cold. "We are looking for something that belongs to us." Garrett's jaw tightened. "Nothing here belongs to you." The rider paused, then he smiled. "We'll see." And with that, the 3 turned and rode back into the darkness. The sun rose slow and red over the desert, painting the sky in shades of blood and copper. Garrett had barely slept. He'd spent the night on the porch, rifle across his lap, eyes scanning the horizon for movement. The riders hadn't returned, but their message was clear. "We know you're here." Inside, Samuel was awake, sitting at the table with a tin cup of water. His face was drawn, shadows under his eyes deep as bruises. He didn't look like a child. He looked like someone who'd already lived a lifetime. Ben emerged from the back room, suspenders hanging loose, hair disheveled. He glanced at Garrett, then at Samuel, then back at Garrett. "They came, didn't they?" Ben asked. "3 of them. They didn't stay long." "They will." Garrett nodded. He knew Ben was right. Cord's men were patient. They'd wait, watch. And when the moment was right, they'd strike. The only question was when. "I need you to do something," Garrett said. Ben raised an eyebrow. "What?" "If I don't make it back, I need you to take Samuel south. To Tucson. There's a woman there, Maria Vasquez. She runs a mission. Tell her I sent you." "Garrett, promise me." Ben's jaw worked. Finally, he nodded. "I promise." "Good." Garrett turned to Samuel. "You ready to ride?" The boy nodded. They left an hour later, just as the heat began to rise. Garrett had saddled 2 horses, a bay mare for himself and a smaller sorrel for Samuel. The boy struggled at first, unused to the stirrups, but he learned quickly. His movements were stiff, uncertain, but determined. They rode north, toward the ridge. The land changed as they climbed. The desert floor gave way to scrub and rock, the air thinning as they ascended. Garrett kept one hand on the reins and the other near his rifle. His eyes swept the landscape constantly, searching for signs of ambush. Samuel rode in silence, his small frame swaying with the horse's rhythm. He didn't complain, didn't ask questions, just followed. By midday, they reached the ridge. The valley stretched out below them, a vast, barren expanse of cracked earth and skeletal trees. In the center stood a cluster of buildings, half collapsed and weathered gray, the mining camp. Garrett pulled his horse to a stop. "That's it." Samuel stared down at the valley, his face pale. "He's there." "You're sure?" The boy nodded. Garrett studied the camp. Smoke rose from one of the buildings, thin and steady. Someone was home. He counted the structures, 5 in total, arranged in a rough circle around what might have been a well. No movement, no sound, just stillness. "Too still." "We are being watched," Garrett said quietly. Samuel's head snapped up. "Where?" "Everywhere." They descended slowly, picking their way down the rocky slope. The horses were uneasy, ears flicking, nostrils flaring. Garrett kept his rifle ready, finger near the trigger. As they neared the valley floor, the temperature dropped. The air felt heavier here, oppressive, like walking into a tomb. The skeletal trees cast twisted shadows, and the wind made sounds that didn't seem natural, whispers, almost, voices just below hearing. Samuel's breathing quickened. "I don't like this." "Neither do I. Stay close." They entered the camp on horseback, moving between the buildings. The structures were in worse shape than they'd looked from above, roofs caved in, walls leaning at dangerous angles. The well at the center was dry, choked with debris. But the smoke was real. It came from a building at the far end, the only one with a door still intact. Garrett dismounted and motioned for Samuel to do the same. Stay with the horses. Where are you going? To see who's home. Samuel's eyes widened. Don't leave me. Garrett hesitated. He wanted to tell the boy it would be fine, that he'd be safe, but he'd already lied enough in his life. If anything happens, you ride hard and you don't stop, understand? Samuel nodded, though his hands trembled on the reins. Garrett crossed the camp slowly, boots crunching on broken glass and stone. The closer he got to the building, the stronger the smell became, wood smoke, but also something else, something sweet and rotten. He pressed his back against the wall beside the door, listening. Voices inside, low, murmuring, 2, maybe 3. He kicked the door open and stepped inside, rifle raised. The room was dim, lit only by a small fire in a stone hearth. 3 men sat around it, hunched and gaunt, their faces half hidden in shadow. They looked up at Garrett without surprise, without fear. "We've been expecting you," one of them said. Garrett didn't lower the rifle. "Where's Cord?" The man smiled. His teeth were yellowed, broken, close. "That's not an answer. It's the only one you'll get." Garrett stepped forward, pressing the barrel of the rifle against the man's chest. "I'll ask one more time, where is he?" The man's smile widened. "Behind you." Garrett spun, but he was already too late. A rope tightened around his throat, yanking him backward. The rifle fell from his hands as he clawed at the noose, gasping for air. His vision blurred, dark spots dancing at the edges. Through the haze, he saw a figure step into the doorway. Tall, lean, dressed in black. Sealer's Cord. "Hello, Marshal," Cord said softly. "It's been a long time." Garrett woke to pain. His head throbbed and his throat burned. He tried to move, but his wrists were bound behind him, tied to a wooden post. He was still in the building, but the fire had died down to embers. The 3 men were gone. Sealer's Cord sat across from him, legs crossed, hands folded in his lap. He looked older than Garrett remembered, hair graying at the temples, lines etched deep around his mouth. But his eyes were the same, cold, calculating. "You shouldn't have come," Cord said. Garrett's voice was raw. "Where's the boy?" "Safe for now. If you touch him." "You'll what?" Cord leaned forward. "You're tied to a post, Marshal. You're in no position to make threats." Garrett's jaw tightened. "Why the children?" Cord smiled. "Because they're pure, uncorrupted, the perfect vessels for transformation." "Transformation into what?" "Into something greater, something beyond this world." Cord's eyes gleamed. "You wouldn't understand. You've spent your life chasing justice, clinging to laws written by weak men, but I offer something higher, salvation." "You're insane." "Perhaps," Cord stood, brushing dust from his coat, "but I'm also right, and soon everyone will see." He walked to the door, then paused. "The boy is special, Marshal. He survived longer than the others. That means something." "Don't do this." Cord glanced back, his expression almost pitying. "It's already done." And then he was gone. Garrett didn't know how long he sat there. Time moved strangely in the dark, seconds stretching into minutes, minutes collapsing into hours. His wrists ached from the ropes, and his throat still burned where the noose had been. But his mind was clear. He tested the ropes, pulling slowly, methodically. They were tight, expertly tied, but Garrett had spent years working knots on ranches and in jails. He knew how to find weaknesses. He twisted his wrists, angling them to create slack. The rough fibers bit into his skin, drawing blood, but he didn't stop. Slowly, inch by inch, he worked one hand free. It took an hour, maybe more. When the rope finally fell away, Garrett slumped forward, gasping. His hands were numb, slick with blood. He flexed his fingers, forcing circulation back, then stood on shaky legs. The building was empty. His rifle was gone, but his revolver was still in its holster. Small mercies. He stepped outside into the night. The valley was dark, lit only by a sliver of moon. The camp was silent, but in the distance he saw light, a bonfire burning bright against the black sky. And voices chanting. Garrett moved toward them, staying low, using the ruins for cover. As he got closer, the voices grew louder, more frenzied. He could make out words now, repeated over and over in a hypnotic rhythm. Purify the vessel, cleanse the soul, bring the light. He crept to the edge of the clearing and looked. A crowd had gathered around the bonfire, 20, maybe 30 people, dressed in tattered clothes, faces gaunt and hollow. They swayed in unison, hands raised, eyes fixed on the flames. At the center stood Sealer's cord, arms outstretched, bathed in firelight. And beside him, bound to a wooden frame, was Samuel. Garrett's blood ran cold. The boy was conscious, his blue eyes wide and terrified. He struggled against the ropes, but they held firm. Cord placed a hand on Samuel's head, almost gently, and the crowd's chanting grew louder. Purify the vessel. Garrett's hand moved to his revolver. He could take the shot, drop Cord where he stood, but the crowd was too close. If he missed, or if they rushed him, Samuel would die. He needed another way. Garrett circled the clearing, moving through the shadows. He counted the followers, looking for patterns, weaknesses. Most were unarmed, though a few carried knives or crude clubs. They were believers, not fighters, but belief could be just as dangerous. He spotted a gap in the crowd, a narrow path that led to the wooden frame where Samuel was bound. If he could reach it, if he could cut the boy free, they might have a chance. Garrett took a breath, steadied himself, and moved. He slipped into the crowd, keeping his head down, his movements slow and deliberate. No one looked at him. Their eyes were all on Cord, on the fire, on the ritual. He reached the frame and dropped to one knee, pulling a knife from his boot. The blade was small but sharp. He sawed at the ropes, working quickly, quietly. Samuel's eyes found his. The boy's lips moved, forming a single word. Hurry! The first rope snapped. Garrett moved to the second. And then Cord's voice rang out, cutting through the chanting like a blade. Stop! The crowd fell silent. Cord turned slowly, his gaze locking onto Garrett. For a moment, no one moved. The only sound was the crackle of the fire. I knew you'd come, Cord said, his voice calm, almost amused. You always were predictable, Marshal. Garrett stood, knife in hand, positioning himself between Cord and Samuel. Let him go. Why would I do that? Because if you don't, I'll kill you. Cord smiled. You won't. You're a lawman. You believe in justice, in mercy. You won't kill an unarmed man in front of witnesses. Garrett's grip tightened on the knife. Try me. Cord took a step forward. The crowd shifted, closing in. You think you're saving him, but you're not. This boy is dying, Marshal. The mark on his neck. It's not just a brand. It's a poison, slow but certain. He has days, maybe less. Garrett's stomach dropped. You're lying. Am I? Cord gestured to Samuel. Look at him, low. Okay at his skin, the pallor, the tremors. The brand carries venom, extracted from desert serpents, blessed and cursed in equal measure. It's part of the ritual. The body must be weakened before the spirit can be purified. Garrett glanced at Samuel. The boy's face was pale, his breathing shallow. He hadn't noticed before, but now he saw it, the faint tremor in Samuel's hands, the glassy sheen in his eyes. There's a cure, Cord continued, a counteragent, but only I know how to make it. Bullshit. Cord shrugged. Believe what you want, but if you take him now, he'll be dead before you reach the ridge. Garrett's mind raced. He didn't trust Cord, couldn't, but if there was even a chance, the man was telling the truth. What do you want? Garrett asked. Nothing you'd be willing to give. Try me. Cord's smile faded. His expression turned cold, calculating. Leave, walk away, let the ritual continue, and I'll give you the cure. And Samuel will fulfill his purpose. Garrett's jaw clenched. No deal. Then he dies. Cord's voice was flat, final, and so do you. For a long moment, Garrett stood there, the weight of the choice pressing down on him like a stone. He could fight, probably die, and Samuel would die with him. Or he could walk away, save himself, and let the boy burn. He thought about the deputy in Santa Fe, about every child he'd failed to save, about the promise he'd made to himself, that this time he'd finish it. Garrett looked down at Samuel. The boy's blue eyes met his, and in them, Garrett saw something he hadn't expected. Not fear, not hope. Just acceptance. Don't, Samuel whispered, don't trade yourself for me. Garrett crouched beside him, his voice low. I'm not trading anything, I'm finishing this. He stood, turned to Cord, and spoke clearly. I'll take the cure, but not from you. And with that, he lunged. Garrett moved faster than Cord expected. The knife flashed in the firelight as he closed the distance, driving the blade toward Cord's chest. But the preacher was quick, quicker than a man his age should have been. He twisted, and the knife grazed his ribs instead of piercing his heart. Cord staggered back, clutching the wound, blood seeping between his fingers. The crowd erupted, surging forward with shouts and wild eyes. Garrett didn't wait. He spun, slashing through the remaining ropes binding Samuel. The boy tumbled free, and Garrett caught him, hauling him upright. Run, Garrett commanded. I can't. You will. Garrett shoved Samuel toward the edge of the clearing, then turned to face the oncoming crowd. He drew his revolver and fired twice into the air. The shots cracked like thunder, and the crowd froze, hesitating. Next one's not a warning, Garrett growled. The followers looked to Cord, who was still on his feet, blood staining his black coat. The preacher's face was twisted with pain and fury. Kill him, Cord rasped. The crowd hesitated. Then one man, tall, broad-shouldered, with wild eyes, lunged forward, a club raised high. Garrett fired. The man dropped. The crowd scattered, some fleeing into the darkness, others falling to their knees, wailing. The spell of Cord's control shattered like glass. Garrett crossed the clearing, his revolver trained on Cord. The preacher had fallen to one knee, his hand pressed to the wound. Blood pooled beneath him. Where's the cure? Garrett demanded. Cord laughed, a wet, rattling sound. There is no cure. Garrett's blood ran cold. What? I lied, the brand is just a brand. Pain and fear, Marshal, that's all it ever was. Cord's eyes gleamed with a feverish light, but the boy believed it, and belief is the only poison that matters. Garrett's fist crashed into Cord's jaw, sending the man sprawling. He stood over him, breathing hard, the revolver shaking in his hand. You're done, Garrett said. Cord coughed, blood flecking his lips. Am I? Kill me and another will rise. There's always another. Men like you can't stop men like me, because we offer what you never can. And what's that? Purpose. Garrett stared down at Cord, and for a moment he felt the weight of it, the endless cycle, the futility. Men like Cord would always exist, and men like Garrett would always chase them. But that didn't mean he'd stop trying. He lowered the revolver. You're right, I can't stop all of you, but I can stop you. He turned and walked away, leaving Cord bleeding in the dirt. Garrett found Samuel at the edge of the camp, crouched behind a ruined wall. The boy looked up as Garrett approached, his face streaked with tears. Is it true? Samuel asked. There's no poison. Garrett knelt beside him. No poison, you're going to be fine. Samuel's shoulders shook. Then why does it hurt? Because scars always hurt, even the ones you can't see. The boy buried his face in Garrett's chest, and Garrett held him, feeling the small, fragile weight of him. The valley was quiet now. The fire had burned down to embers. The followers had scattered into the night, and Sela's Cord lay dying beneath the stars. They rode out at dawn, leaving the valley behind. Garrett didn't look back. Samuel sat in front of him on the bay mare, silent and small, his arms wrapped around the saddle horn. They reached the trading post by midday. Ben was waiting on the porch, rifle in hand, eyes sharp. When he saw them, his shoulders sagged with relief. "Thought you were dead," Ben said. "Almost was." Ben's gaze shifted to Samuel and the boy. "He's safe." Ben nodded slowly, cawed. "Dead. You sure?" Garrett thought about the man lying in the dirt, blood pooling beneath him, eyes staring at nothing. "Yeah, I'm sure." Ben disappeared inside and returned with water and food. Samuel ate slowly, mechanically, his eyes distant. "What now?" Ben asked. Garrett looked at the boy. "I take him to Tucson, to the mission. And then I keep riding." Ben studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "You always were a stubborn bastard. Someone has to be." 3 months later. The mission sat on the edge of Tucson, a low adobe building surrounded by gardens. Children played in the courtyard, their laughter bright and clear in the afternoon sun. Garrett stood at the gate, watching. Samuel was among them, his face fuller now, color returned to his cheeks. The brand on his neck had faded to a pale scar barely visible beneath his collar. He ran with the other children, smiling, laughing, sounds Garrett hadn't thought the boy capable of. Maria Vasquez, the mission's caretaker, stood beside Garrett, her arms crossed, her expression warm. "He's doing well," she said. "Good. He asks about you, wonders when you'll come back." Garrett didn't answer. Maria glanced at him. "Will you?" "I don't know." She nodded, understanding. "He doesn't blame you, you know, for what happened." "Maybe he should. Maybe, but he doesn't." Garrett watched as Samuel looked up, his blue eyes scanning the courtyard. When he saw Garrett, the boy's face lit up. He waved, tentative, hopeful. Garrett raised his hand and waved back. Then he turned and walked away, leaving the laughter behind. Epilogue. Years later, travelers passing through the Arizona Territory would speak of a man, tall, weathered, with storm-gray eyes, who rode alone, helping those who couldn't help themselves. Some called him a hero, others called him a ghost. Garrett Cole never stayed long in any one place. He moved from town to town, following rumors of men like Sealer's cord, stopping cruelty where he found it. And in the quiet moments, when the desert stretched empty before him and the stars burned cold above, he would think of a boy with blue eyes and a scar on his neck. And he would ride on. Because that's what men like Garrett did. They rode until there was nothing left to ride toward. And even then, they didn't stop.